realistically, it was 9 months. Like
No.
you start to get small signals, but first 3 months, like you're in the void. Like
Yeah.
no one's engaging. And I say no one, like you find like the person, right? And so like those first 90 days, you're just like, oh my gosh, like these small things. I actually started in biomedical engineering. I thought I was going to be a doctor, and then I started shadowing some doctors and students of doctors. I was like, oh wait, this isn't for me. It's kind of an extreme commitment of 10 years with the potential to kind of deliver this impact, and that didn't appeal. And then everything else comes from that. So every DM that I'm talking about, those more like one-on-ones, all inbound. You can go follow the Fletch process right now. It's free. It's out there. If you really want to dig in, we've got this little thing. It's like $50. You can go read everything we've ever posted, have all access to the frameworks, which we just earned their trust without realizing it. And they start following us and then eventually come back later. Or they get in line and they're like, no, I really want to learn. And like, oh, if you have a structured process, share it with me. And then they become good customers.
So we are officially live with one of the co-founders of Fletch PMM, Rob Kaminsky. Please correct me if I said that
Now you nailed it.
incorrectly.
It's
Perfect.
funny. Most people, they say it right, but it gets misspelled all the time.
Oh
But
yeah.
you're off the hook for that one today.
What's your background?
I'm Polish roots on both sides, and
Nice.
Slovenian are kind of the primary background for me.
Oh, nice, awesome. I assumed Polish because I saw the ski, so I'm like, most Poles have
Yeah.
ski at the end. So yeah, really happy to have you on, Rob. And like we were saying backstage a little bit, I was speaking with Anthony. I think it was 4 months ago, if my calculations are correct, and he is quite a character. So
Oh, yes.
I made a post on my LinkedIn just regarding Fletch PMM, what Anthony specifically was doing on LinkedIn, how he was posting, how he was getting his virality, how you guys like
Yeah.
got the momentum of Fletch PMM. And he made a comment which I had to hold true, and I had to reach out to you as well to get your side of the story as well. And yeah, I just wanted to know, like, give me some background about, like, let's even start a bit early too, because I know that you were in engineering beforehand, and
Yes.
what got you all the way from engineering to doing to working with Anthony at Fletch PMM.
Sure. Yeah. It's like many folks who get into product and entrepreneurship, a very non-linear path. So for me, I actually started in biomedical engineering. I thought I was going to be a doctor, and then I started shadowing some doctors and students of doctors. I was like, oh wait, this isn't for me. It's kind of an extreme commitment of 10 years with the potential to kind of deliver this impact, and that didn't appeal. And for me, the pivot out of engineering, I started working for a medical device firm designing surgical instrumentation. I was part of a rapid prototyping group where there'd be these specialty surgeries that need the tooling to be slightly different for these unique scenarios. And so it was really product development oriented, which was really fun. The part that intrigued me the most is we would deliver the solution, obviously like one to one. And then there was this group that would they would basically look for patterns of like, how often are we doing this type of specialty augmentation with our instrumentation? And whenever they saw patterns, they're like, oh, we could probably commercialize this. And so these were folks that were like creating new business lines off of this. And I was so fascinated by that, and along with just this, like, where do these requirements even come from? And so almost like true human-centered design. But I got really intrigued about the business side. Like, how do you come up with ideas? How do you build it? How do you commercialize it? How do you sell these things? Which I was completely ignorant to. I just never spent time in sales or customer service or anything like that. I mean, I think most engineers fall into that bucket. Like, we're not really good communicators. And so that sent me on this, I would call it my first career pivot, where I sort of like redirected, and I was trying to get into business programs. And I found a perfect one that really focused on technology entrepreneurship and commercialization, and started doing that, which led me into consulting in general, but mostly product consulting, market research. And in doing that, I met a mentor who was an entrepreneur himself. He knew I had a desire. I was always like really curious about business building, and had some like really small endeavors and things I was doing on the side. And he's like, if you really are serious about entrepreneurship, go spend time in sales, which like fear just rolled over me. I was like,
Oh
oh,
yeah.
like sales. And so, but I took his advice. And so I took the experiences that I had and I pivoted into a technology sales role as a sales engineer at a software startup. And that's where I really cut my teeth into like, how do you sell software? How do you show up to a client? How do you explain what products do? And then leveled up to where I was eventually an executive selling, a sales executive. running a small sales team. And then I was like, okay, I learned some great things here, but I was getting pulled. I wanted to go back to the product side because I'm very solution oriented. And so that brought me back into, we wouldn't have called it product marketing. We called it like solution architecting of sorts. But it was really figuring out how you figure out what the problem is in the market and then develop a solution and then go articulate that. And did that for a bit. The company sold, the startup that I was in sold to Vista Equity Group down here in Austin. And there was this opportunity to either like go with it or leave. And long story short, I did leave, but I still ended up coming down to Austin and I joined Oracle in more of a product marketing capacity to see what life was like at these larger enterprises. And I did not like life at these larger enterprises. I spent most of my time just arguing with VPs and not really making any progress. And so all the time I spent in startups, I was like, oh yeah, that really is my place. And that brought me to the other side of like, I joined they called themselves a digital product studio. Effectively, they were web development, design, and strategy for startups. And so that was my sweet spot. And I was really getting deployed as a fractional product and go-to-market leader. And that's where Anthony and I first met. And we started collaborating on projects that ultimately led to Fletch. But I'll pause there if there's any questions in this very like curvy road to meeting Anthony and then eventually building out Fletch. And I could definitely share that story as well.
No, for now, not yet, because I was also an engineering background, and
Okay.
right when you said that, like the sales was it's an awkward part, to be honest, to make the
Yeah.
transition, because you have like the technical aspect, and then you're like people in technology, they're not the same sometimes. So with the transition, moving forward from tech to sales, even how you get clients now, or even actually before that, maybe we should like jump into the stuff about meeting up with Anthony and then starting Fletch, because I do have a
Sure.
few questions of like inbound sales, how you guys talk with clients. Before
Yeah.
we get to
So
that one.
the context for us starting Fletch is whenever I was not deployed as kind of a fractional, again, product and go to market person with these startups, our efforts were like, how do we sell this set of strategic services, of this big range of stuff to B2B startup companies? And so that was kind of the first remit that Anthony and I started to work on together. Along there was a couple folks working on this challenge, and we were kind of flailing around. We're like, do we do outbound? Do we do what? Like we went right into the
Yeah.
tactics to a degree, which I think a lot of people do mistakenly, because the core issue is that when you're in an agency setting that does a lot of different services, like how do you market 100 different services? It's really difficult to do with limited budget, limited time. And so we started to develop really our thesis of like, well, we got to get specific somehow. And so we did some experimentation where we got really specific vertically. And we're like, oh, what happens if we just focus on a really small subset of startups and do really targeted outbound effectively? And it works. Like it was kind of amazing. We did this whole thing where we went after headless CMS companies. There's about 300 in the world. And we built out this report of like, hey, this is where we see the market's moving. And I basically got to meet every founder and executive in that space in a span of like 30 days because we were like giving this value first. And the issue was they were like, this is amazing. I think you can help us. What do you do? And I couldn't explain our service. It was like, well, we could do anything. And so that didn't really work. And simultaneously, we started to experiment with LinkedIn for different reasons. I was always one of those people who like, I knew I wanted to build a business. I knew I had a lot to say, but I'd never published. Like fear of publishing, fear of getting the ideas out there. I was very inconsistent. And Anthony and I, we had almost this accountability partnership of like, he started posting, and it was crazy as I think one of his first two posts actually went viral. It was like a note-taking post about like user story maps and like using Miro, like totally random. And I'm like, okay, if that's working, like, so we just started writing, but we were throwing stuff against the wall. But as we started to do that, we just started to talk about more about product strategy and market strategy and these businesses. We were kind of just listening for signal of like what resonates. And we stumbled into this world of product marketing. Again, I wouldn't have called myself a product marketer at the time. Only in retrospect, it's like, wow, we really were doing product marketing, but the discipline wasn't really there. And so we started to narrow in on that. And in terms of how the business came, is like we knew we wanted to create a really focused service offering. and ideally for this very specific audience, but we didn't really know what that looked like. And the two, I'll call them like our foundational strategies we were trying to follow. There's a book written by John Warrillow called Built to Sell that I had forced Anthony to read. And it's basically this fictional story about a service business trying to productize, really trying to sell their business and running into really positioning challenges. And then the other one is Greg Hickman of Alt Agency had this model that he called the 5 1s, which is one product, one avatar, one channel, one tactic for 1 year on a path to $1 million business line. And we're like, we kind of merged those together in our thesis of like, we know we need to do one thing. There was only one problem. We didn't know what service we were selling, and we didn't really know who we were selling to. And so there was this period maybe of like, we started posting and people started to engage with the post, and we were kind of figuring out how LinkedIn worked. And it was this excuse to get on calls with all these founders and executives and just kind of figure out what the hell they're struggling with. And what we would do with each call, and this is like for those like sell it before you actually have it type of a deal, we'd listen to their problem and then we'd say, oh, I have a service for that. And so someone would get on and be like, I don't know what to do about pricing. I don't know how to package this thing. And we're like, oh, we have a service. And we would make it up pretty much on the spot and just experiment with like, what did they react to? Could we actually sell the things? And we were really mindful to be like, where are their patterns? And the pattern that really emerged was this messaging thing. It was like, I don't know how to start my marketing. And so we had those two threads going of a lot of exposure to founders. And then we just started throwing ourselves deep into the product marketing world and reading and rereading, Crossing the Chasm and April Dunford's book, obviously awesome, and listening to all these podcasts. And that really started things, but that was kind of how the business began, was like, don't have a service, making up services, and then quickly making a decision of like, oh yeah, we're going to do this positioning thing. This sounds really cool. I'll stop there.
So yeah, I mean, there's a lot to go into. Every time you were talking, it was like another question came in. But so you kind of started, you and Anthony started off with like not knowing exactly 100% the direction that you wanted to take it. Why LinkedIn out of all of the platforms that you could have taken, even if it was like Instagram, Facebook? A lot of people, they're like, let's be omnipresent and see if one
Yeah.
sticks. But did you just go full on LinkedIn, or were you kind of expanding on different platforms too?
I think it was part luck to a degree. It was like the real answer is we knew founders were hanging out there. Like we were following people and product leaders, like they're there. And so let's talk to them. Like that's the idea, is like, let's comment on their post. Let's do our own post. And like, that was the beginning, was you, and it's very humbling in the beginning. You start posting, no one knows who you are. Like getting to 10 likes was like, oh my God, 10 likes. It was like incredible.
Yeah.
Because, and you see these like patterns, like if you got to 10 likes, you probably got a connection request. If you got to 20 likes, you probably got 2 connection requests. And these were just excuses for us to go start a conversation. And so that was the goal in the beginning, was like, I have nothing to sell, but something I said resonated. And it was just pure like, what resonated? What's up? Why'd you reach out? And like, you started to build this like really tribal small network of people, and it's really small. And so you were in that, can I get 5 connections this week mindset? But you start doing that. And even at that level, I mean, you're talking about 50 to 100 people a year, but then it gets better. Oh my God, 30 likes, 40 likes, 10 connection requests. And then, you start to figure out how the algorithm works. And then you'll have those posts that just go wild, and you'll wake up and it's like, oh my God, I got 150 connections. And that's when it was like signal of that attention was really validation of like, there's something here. We just don't know what it is. You asked the question, do we do any other platforms? No. And this was maybe more the Greg Hickman piece. It's like, when you hedge your bets across all those pieces, like foundationally, I just don't think it works. Like what people forget is the tools make it easy to be in all these places, but they don't make it easy to be effective in all these places. Each platform is its own science. Like each medium, like the way you do a LinkedIn post is very different than how you would do a Twitter post. It's very different than how you do a YouTube short. Like it takes different skills. And at the beginning, we didn't have any of the skills. Like we're just 2 schmoes on the internet. Now, Anthony, I would argue, did have some skills. He came more from a content background, where that was not my background. And so he was able to sort of lead a little bit in that of like, hey, here's some things we could try, but it was all trial and error. Like literally our ethos was like, I don't know, post it. Even if we didn't even totally believe the post, because it was the community that was then educating us of like, well, they'll let us know if we're right or wrong. And the learning speed was just out of this world. Like hour by hour, we were learning at a crazy pace.
Actually, let me dig into that one too. What do you mean, like by hour by hour? Like you get your feedback is like is more instant on social media or on LinkedIn rather than any other platform?
100%. And there's a perfect example of this because at the same time we were doing this and starting to get some engagement, the company we were working for was going to attend South by Southwest here in Austin. And Anthony was going to come on down and join. I'm already here, so it's pretty easy. And we're like, okay, we have this thing. Like, we think we're doing product marketing. We're going to talk to all these founders at South by Southwest. And if you just look at the numbers, like, we spent 3 days walking around, standing around, hanging out with our company too, but trying to talk to founders. I was able to have like 20, maybe like 10 founder conversations a day, but like they're not in the context of like what we want to talk about. Sometimes it's like, what music do you like? Oh, what do you like about Austin? Where are you from? Like all that kind of bullshit. And for us, like on the flip side, with all those connections and DMs and comments, we could have hundreds of conversations with founders and marketers and product people in half a day on LinkedIn. And so when you pair that volume, and because we get to set the context, each one of those is just a data point, like a qualitative data point of like, what do people say when I say this? What do people say when I ask this question? And it's that huge volume of data that then let Anthony and I step back and be like, where is there actually themes starting to bubble up? Like, are we seeing repeat of anything? And so yeah, that there, like people don't think of social media this way. They think of it as a marketing tool. When you're
Mm.
doing a build in public motion, it's actually the most incredible market testing tool and product building tool because of how quick the feedback loops are.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things too that I really admire about LinkedIn, because I built platforms on Instagram and Facebook, and then LinkedIn, I came to it and I'm like, this is like a whole different beast from what I'm used to. And even
Yes.
because I see that your posts have a certain style. Like I know that it's a Fletch post by the style, but at the same time, what would you say is like the balance between posting and inserting yourself into the conversation versus also using LinkedIn in order to DM people and build conversations? Do you use it
Yeah.
50-50? Do you weigh one more than the other?
One of these leads. And so even
Mm.
to date, we have done absolutely zero outbound on any platform, LinkedIn included. Like you will
Whoa.
never get a, hey, founder, just saw you raise, need help with homepage. Like we're not there yet. Maybe that will come as we layer on. And so for us, the organic stuff we post, that drives the boat. And so there's kind of a process to this. It looked clean later on. In the beginning, it was very messy, but it was basically Anthony and I would come up with ideas and thesis about how to do good product marketing positioning, interesting observations we had. We would spend hours on the phone, and our wives can attest, like hours on the phone, arguing with each other, debating. And usually, what would trickle out of those conversations is these little nuggets of insight. And whenever we would stumble into them, we're just like, you should post that. You should post that. You should post that. And so we would do this like synthesis, go into our dark caves, write stuff, post it as fast as we can, and then come back and argue again about what people reacted to. And as we started to actually get some customers, we had the extra input of client work. Where like there is gold in sitting in front of a founder like this, asking very tough challenges, trying to help them with this very strategic thing. And the thesis is like what they're struggling with, more other founders are struggling with. And so then we would just go post that in a way that was really helpful and then start sharing the tactics that we used. And so it creates this like compound flywheel where there's ideas everywhere, there's problems everywhere, there's lots of posts to get out, there's a lot of unknowns. And the key is just putting in the work to synthesize that. And so having a sparring partner like Anthony and I spending like, again, just thousands of hours digging into this and then using all these inputs of other podcasts, our work, comments, and people replying, like we've got to create and host this conversation. And then everything else comes from that. So every DM that I'm talking about, those more like one-on-ones, all inbound. And so it's never us pestering. It's almost always people hitting us up and saying, I saw what you did. I had a question. Or I saw what you did. I think you could help. I saw what you did. I want to meet. And then it was just meet with them, go spend the time and go dig in. And that was effectively our market research, but we wouldn't have called it that.
Mm. Yeah. And I guess so as well. Like, is there also like an aspect of nurturing the lead too? Like, if somebody comes in with a question, like, "Hey, how can I solve my positioning for X, Y, and Z?" Like, how long would you spend? I guess like DMing back and forth, or how long was like the conversion
Yeah.
time between that?
In the beginning, we would spend a ton of time because, and you have to remember, like the volume wasn't there. And
Mm.
so when only 10 people were connecting with you in a week, like you can get into some really deep conversations because there was time to do it. We didn't have a lot of clients to service at the time. And so there's a lot of time to do content and do these one-on-ones, filling our calendars, which looking back, I remember I'm actually quite an introvert. Like communication is a learned skill for me, but it doesn't totally fill my cup. I need to like re-energize. And I remember these days where we were like filling our calendars with like 10, 15 founder calls a day. And then at night, Anthony and I just talking through like what happened, like what'd you do in this hour, what'd you do in this hour, and it was super stressful. But like again, it was just so helpful for us from a learning perspective, and so we could put a ton of that. And it, the adage, and I always forget who to give this credit to, but like do things that don't scale. That does not scale. I can't go have hour-long conversations with everyone who connects with me currently. We do try. I would say it's become a little bit more async over the past 6 to 18 months, just because of the volume of people in our network and people that have questions. And so we have to be pretty protective of our calendars. But in the beginning, man, I would talk to anybody who was really curious about what we were doing. And that was really important to build trust and credibility. Like you're kind of developing those relationships, but then also educating ourselves on like what people are really struggling with.
And one of the things that that stood out to me too, because I do know a lot of people that are doing, even myself included, I do LinkedIn outbound, but with a little different style than rather than sending like a templated message. With people who are just seeing you being like, oh, we have, you guys have inbound leads coming in. Like, how long did it take for you guys to build that momentum as well? And like, when were you just seeing
Yeah.
like just two people liking, and maybe like getting discouraged also from like just seeing that?
I would say we got to go a little bit faster because there was two of us. Realistically, it was 9 months. Like
No.
you start to get small signals, but first 3 months, like you're in the void. Like
Yeah.
no one's engaging. And I say no one, like you find like the person, right? And so like those first 90 days, you're just like, oh my gosh, like these small things. There's truly though, it like has this like curve to it as you're going. And so 6 months in, it's like, okay, like the needle's starting to bounce a little bit, but it's not actually going anywhere. And that's where I would say that 6 to 9 month phase is probably right around where we closed our first customer. Keeping in mind, we did not have a real process, like let alone a framework. It was like, I think we could do this. And it was like a swag of what the service looked like. And at the time, it was just like, hey, we're going to run a couple workshops and then we're going to give you, we're going to help you make these decisions. Like, I almost don't even remember. It was like very lackluster, but it all stemmed from the trust, right? Like the people that worked with us on month 7 had seen our stuff around month 3, saw it again month 4, saw it again month 5, saw it again month 6, and then finally like, okay, these guys literally they keep talking about this thing. I'm working on that. I'm just going to go talk to them. And then we would sell our stuff. The important thing to keep in mind too is we were selling this for basically free. Like it was it was so cheap to work with us because we didn't have any credibility to price. We didn't have a process to actually like fall back on. And even our posts arguably were like free work. Like we would do a post, we're like, hey, this is what we think the problem is, here's how we fixed it, and we would just go do the work for free for companies that didn't ask for the work. And then another company would be like, I want that, will you do that for me? And so they basically pulled the service out of us. And more specifically, we were doing these, we called them positioning audits. They were basically homepage audits where we were trying to infer their positioning, and people just liked what we had to say and they liked the copy we came up with. And so that was the start, long-winded way to say like 9 to 12 months. And then once it started working, and the key for us was then we made some choices of getting specific. So like every time we started to post about more and more specific things, from like something with startups and product and marketing to something with startups and marketing to something with startups and product marketing to something with startups and positioning and messaging. Every time we made that choice to go very narrow, engagement goes up because these algorithms are tuned to like put really specific content in front of really specific people that might have that challenge. And we really could then start to specialize. And that's really counterintuitive for a lot of founders. They think like, I got to start broad, I got to go wide, I got to be helpful
Yeah.
with a lot of things. Very much the opposite. And then, we get past that 12-month mark and you could just feel it. It was all pull. Like people were just, we couldn't service people fast enough. The model was starting to formalize. But I'll pause there. Long-winded way of saying like, yeah, 9 months of just grinding for grinding's sake.
Yeah.
But we felt like we were learning.
And people also think that, even myself, when I was starting too, I always think, I'm like, no, no, we have to offer like more so that we can grab more people. And
Yeah.
it's very, very hard, because especially when you're trying to like get the ball rolling and you're like not seeing the leads that you want to come in, you're like, we have
Yeah.
to be like everything. And I don't know.
There is something to that though, Jordan. When you say
Mhm,
like do more in the beginning, our
mhm.
first 20 clients,
Yeah,
they got more of me and Anthony than any other clients, like the above and beyond. And
fair.
that was part of the pitch. It was like, hey, like these people like knew we were getting started. It was like, we're getting started. We don't really know, but our energy and our consistency of how we showed up was so strong, like we were undeniable to people who were willing to give us a shot. And like that's what they were paying on. They're like, oh, these guys are cheap. Like, let's give them a chance. And like that's how you get your first customers. And only if you succeed in delivering value, then can you get more reputable customers that'll buy you off of your like recognition and what you've done in the past. But we had no track record to speak of.
Yeah. Were there a lot of the customers that were coming in first, or the clients, were they asking, hey, can you show us case studies that's directly correlated to ROI? No.
Oh, okay. There's two things. A lot of people ask for ROI. In the beginning, we were just direct of like, well, you're the guinea pigs. This will be new, and that's why it's so cheap, and that's why you're gonna get us and like directly, and we'll make sure it works. And if you feel like you hate it, we would just give a guarantee. Be like, just like we'll give you your money back. Like, 'cause we were in it for the reps, and
Mm.
it's kind of amazing that I'll share a short like anecdote. This just came up yesterday talking to Anthony. When we started, it like triggered my brain. We said we wanted to be able to, when we started doing positioning, and we're like, okay, I think this is it. We wanted to be able to say that we had positioned more startups than anybody on the planet. And our thesis was with the repetitions, the quality will come. And to date, I think we just crossed 500 companies that we've been able to take through our positioning process. I think we may have that title, like somebody in a in adjacent newsletter sort of said like these guys have positioned more companies than anybody in the world, and we're like, oh my gosh, there it is in the wild 2.5 years later. That's what we said we were going to do. And so like that was the idea, was just repetition. And a lot of them in the beginning, we are first to admit, like, sorry if you're out there, first 20, 30, 50 customers of Fletch, the, the results were not great. Like we were figuring things out as we were building. And the second piece to this around ROI is like any consultant, at least this is our view, not everybody has to believe this. Any consultant or agency that promises ROI, like grow revenue, grow customers, we think they're 90% full of shit, because when it comes to startups and building businesses and doing marketing, there are hundreds and thousands of variables that are not under the control of this third party agency. And so while we may influence that stuff, we don't promise it because we can't control it. We promise
Mm.
clarity of thought, aligning your teams around positioning, and a sharper homepage, and that's it. Everything else is up to you and the markets.
Yeah, yeah. And even if it's like book demos, is even that something that you can agree that, well, maybe you'll book demos will go up by like 5 to 10%. I don't know.
Sometimes, but not necessarily. So there's
Mm.
actually one of our very successful clients, one of our early ones. They were maybe in the first 50, probably around 60 range. It's a company called AG5, and they came to us. I'll never forget it because they said we're getting about 70 leads a month today, and they asked, "Is that going to go up?" But when you walk it out, like, do you really want that number to go up, or is it really more about getting better quality leads to come in? And we said this in the beginning, and we challenged them on it, and it actually happened. So 9 months down the road, 12 months down the road, they changed the positioning. They sharpened it. They picked a more specific market, and they reported back to us. They're like, and they couldn't believe it. They're like, our leads per month have gone down to 40 or 50 a month, but the pipeline, the qualified pipeline went up. And it's like that there, like as a specific data point. But you can, and like there's lots of data points. Again, that's why I don't want to put too much emphasis on it. But that data point to me is good positioning working. We are DQing out all the bad folks, and we are letting the folks know who might actually buy our product what we do in such a clear and compelling way that we will make more money with less people coming in. And you think of all the downstream implications. Sales reps aren't wasting time on bad fit prospects. Product isn't building features for people who are complaining and are ready to churn that maybe you did convince to sell. And so it's not just about more demos. It's about getting more quality customers into your ecosystem.
So
That's the ideal state of positioning.
this actually like kind of beautifully combines with the question I wanted to go back to, which was the niching down aspect of it. I don't know, maybe this is like too broad of a statement, but I personally think that niching down is always better. But let me leave it open to
Yeah.
what you want to say. Is niching down always better? And if it is, why?
In general, yes, I believe that with you, but we have to remember there are a lot of ways to build businesses. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's a higher level question of what kind of business are you trying to build? Because there are, to some founders, niching down, being more profitable, being known for one thing is their nightmare. These are the usually venture backed founders who have such a huge vision that that successful state of a niche down business that's making a bunch of money doesn't appeal to them at all. They want the headlines to be the everything app that's out there, and and for them, niching down is the wrong strategy. And this is something we have to weigh, especially when these venture backed companies come to us. So there's no right or wrong. It just depends on what's your context, what are you trying to do with your business, what are the goals. If you're honest about that, and for us, for Anthony and I, that's our answer, because we look at our business as we just want it to work. Like, we just want it to like be successful. We want people to like the product. We want people to get value from the product, and we want to make some money in the meantime. Like, we're not shy about this. Like, profit kind of rules our mindset when we think about niching down, but it also helps with all the execution aspect of this. But not everyone is for this. Like, I think about Adam Robinson and what he's doing with our B2B. He's like, and really bootstrappers in general, like, they're the profit. Like, I can have a successful business without it being worth $1 billion. And on the flip side, the other venture backed ones, to some degree, like, they don't care about the profits. They care about the impact on the world, which is like amazing, good for them. I think you can have a little bit of both. But in general, comebacks, because I'm hedging a little bit,
No, go for
when
it.
it does come to positioning conceptually, it is 100% about niching down with the recognition that you can always broaden later. And
Mm-hmm.
that's ultimately what we do. Like, how can we help these companies get more specific so they have a better chance of actually being known for something?
Yeah. And this was like my pitch to this to niching down. Like even if you want to be, and maybe I'm like way out of my depth with this one, but even if you want to be like the Nike or Coca Cola, I even think that these huge companies they were like niche at some point, and then they started to expand.
All of them. And I say all, 99.9%. There are rare exceptions, but you're 100% correct. Like, even like, we look at like one of the biggest businesses of all time, Amazon, they just sold
Yeah.
books. Like, we're the biggest bookstore on the planet. And now they truly are the everything conglomerate company. But like, without that like wedge, like, there's no lead to follow, right? There's no operational cadence and priorities to make any product sales or marketing decisions. And that's where just there's a lot of flailing around, and everybody tries everything. They try all the tactics, they go into every channel, they try every audience, they're selling multiple products. Like, you can build a business that way. It is a freaking hard business to run, and they usually fail.
And it's hard. Again, it's hard. My background isn't business at all, and we kind of learned also as we went. And it's hard to like kind of have those like horse blinders on and be like, let's just
Yeah.
focus in on this and let's like be the best in this for as much as we can.
You brought up Anthony and I's like personalities in this,
Mm.
and what you just shared just really resonates with me, because I shared my career path. Like, I am a generalist, like, pure description of a generalist, or I'll say was. And I used to always think like my value is my range. And there's some truth to that.
Mm.
Like, you can put me in almost any room and I can like pick up the context and like actually get some things done. And I used to think like that was it. And I was effectively like training myself to be a CEO, but who's giving me a CEO? No one's going to let me be a CEO. Like, that was so crazy. And so, like, me even marketing myself as an individual, like, we'll say, like, from a job seeking perspective, I was hard to market because I was all things to all people. And I'm thinking, like, that's my value. And so I was falling into the same trap that these founders come to us with without even really recognizing it. And Anthony, when we started doing this, he came in with a kind of a different mindset, because he hasn't been in tech. He comes from more of a content and church operations and these other things. And his mindset was, I don't care what we do, I just want to get a job in tech. And like, I think the best way to do that is just like get really razor sharp in one thing. That scared me in the beginning. Like, I remember actually having conversations with my wife when we're starting to get a little traction with our content, and Anthony was the first one ready to commit to product marketing and positioning and even homepages. And I remember having a lot of like reluctance against that. I was like, man, do I really just want to be like known as this homepage? Like it's just this small thing. Like, am I selling myself short? And it was just pure ego. Like I was getting in the way of this. And after, we're years down the line, man, I see everything so differently now. Is like a requirement of being known and even tapping into that generalist skill set requires a spiky edge to it, because all roads lead to this high end strategy conversations and some of the stuff we even were getting into. And whether we picked homepages and positioning or solution architecting and like technical diagrams, both those businesses need to know how the business works and what its plans are. And so even if I was going down a CTO route of like, oh yeah, we're going to map your backend infrastructure, we could still get into like I'm like, all right, well, who's this for? What's the context? What are they? We still have the same conversation. And so like all roads lead to that. And it's the people that never get to that and they just end up in that generalist range. And again, that's fine. Like they're smart people, like, but where I struggled is like struggled with execution until I was willing to like you said, put those blinders on, be really good at one thing. And that's where everything truly flies. Marketing works, product works. You start selling things, people know who you are and what you do. But it's a really hard decision to make. And I empathize with a lot of these founders that we force them to make this choice, or we try to.
Yeah, and LinkedIn, it's like, to be honest, coming from like an Instagram and Facebook background, I'm like, I made the shift to LinkedIn and everyone's like, why are you shifting to LinkedIn? There's so much more scope on Instagram. But I'm like, I don't know, I wanted to be famous. That's why I went on to I went on to LinkedIn, because it's such a, like an, I guess like an unpopular platform, like generally speaking, in terms of
Yeah.
uh maybe like someone who's going to recognize you in the street as like a LinkedIn influencer,
And
right?
it's famous in terms of like whose perspective. So
Mm-hmm.
Anthony and I, we
Right.
were in New York the other week, and we went out to dinner with a couple of friends that he knows that live in New York. And it was interesting. They are, I wouldn't say they're in tech, but they're like tech adjacent. They work for like some larger Fortune 500 companies. And Anthony and I, one of the conversations like trailed off into all these things that are like mainstream in B2B technology. And we started saying all these like words and company names and concepts. They didn't know any of them. And we're
Mm.
like, huh, like they don't even know them. Like, and when we think about the recognition that we get, like it's this very small slice of the internet. Like even in LinkedIn, I would argue like most folks don't know us. But if you happen to be in B2B and are in marketing or product, you have a decent chance to know who Fletch and who Anthony and I are. And so like that insight is like the world's a freaking huge place. And like being well known is so relative to the audience you want to be known for.
Mm.
And like the question is like when you move to Instagram, like who's on Instagram? It's probably not these B2B folks that are doing it. It's probably a totally different set of people. But that really opened our eyes to it, because we were even shocked of like, man, we tend to put this spotlights over ourselves. Like, oh yeah, everyone, they know what we're doing. It's like, no, people got their own shit to deal with.
Who made that quote of like I think it was Adam Robbins, who's like, I'd rather be known well than well known, something along those lines.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know who said that. It's a good quote though.
So the other thing that I asked Anthony, which was like one of the pressing questions, and I think also like Chris Walker talks about it too, is like, you guys brand yourselves like as the face of the company as well, but in the idea that like if one of you guys isn't in the company anymore, how do you guys have the plan of kind of keep Fletch going on
Yeah.
without and removing you guys from Fletch?
This is such an interesting question for us right now.
Mm-hmm.
And even when you talked to Anthony 4 or 5 months ago, the answer is probably different in based on how we're treating it. And so this is a inflection point for us. And what you're really asking is like, how do we take this personal brand and recognition, transfer it into a company brand and recognition that runs without us? And even before I talk about how we're trying to do that, even that transition is a choice. And so many folks in our space know April Dunford. She's like the OG positioning expert in our space, and she's fantastic. And we've met with her and we've talked about this openly. The way she's approached it is like she didn't want to build a business. Like to her, this was like, no, I'm going to be, my career arc is business of one. Like she's basically an extremely successful solopreneur, and that model's different. And you've seen it played out with April. It's staying power. It's like, I'm just going to stay in this game. I'm going to stay in my lane. I'm going to write books about it. I'm going to speak about it. More and more people will know who I am. And with that, I get to raise prices. And so she's at a premium price for her services.
Yeah.
And it's a like And this is not a negative, it's a lifestyle business that she loves, admittedly. And she's like, I just love the craft and I love all that it's been able to do for me. And Anthony and I had this choice because we could just follow April's playbook, keep the business a business of two people, like at the time, like us three technically, because we had a copywriter helping us out, and just keep raising prices and like lifestyle this for the next 20, 30 years. And that's fine. When Anthony and I came to the realization, this goes back to what we talked about earlier, like, what do we really want? Why are we building this business? Our personalities are such, and if anyone's taken like an Enneagram, Anthony and I are actually the same Enneagram number. It's number 3, and we're basically achievement oriented. And
Mm-hmm.
for us, we like to build things and we like to see them work. And
Mm-hmm.
so for us, as much as we have had to learn the craft and enjoy the craft, for us, it's more about like, all right, how do we grow this thing? Like,
Yeah.
let's go, and do we build more things, right? So we know that that's us. And so that put us on this journey of like, okay, will we and do we want to turn this successful freelancer business or freelance into a real business? And the answer was yes. So to date, we're starting this transition. And you asked how. The short answer is we didn't really know. We were like, are people going to work with someone who isn't us? Are they willing to work with just Fletch team? Can we step out of it? How do we market it? Do we price it differently? Or, this is what it costs to work with Rob and Anthony. This is what it costs to work with our team. All these are open questions. What we've learned in the last 6 months or so, because in that time we've hired a positioning consultant, a very experienced product marketer. Her name's Sarah. She actually worked at a client, like she went through our process as a client as one of their founding or lead product marketers,
Yeah.
along with their founders. And so she like cut from the same cloth, understands our framework. And so she was just a perfect fit. And we started to sell her into projects, and we were like, some of that happened naturally. Like some folks, like without us even like trying to frame it, I would like we take all of our sales calls, and I would get in the call and they're like, oh my God, what, you're here? And I'm like, well, yeah, like this is what we do. They just assumed that Anthony and I had a team. And it was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, like this is happening already. Like the brand is rubbing off into the company. And that's not always the case, but that was a good signal for us. And so what we have to do, and this is where some businesses aren't willing to do this, I think Chris Walker, you brought up, has done a nice job, is we have to empower the people that come work alongside us. And so this woman that's now taking on these positioning projects, and I think she's at like 15 or 20 projects already, like starting to build her credibility. Like she's getting the reps in where she's going to have this trust level at a similar level to where Anthony and I are at. We're teaching her how to post on LinkedIn. We're basically trying to help her carve out her own personal brand in this positioning space. And that's a risky thing from a business owner standpoint, because there's a world where, we fast forward like 3-4 years, Sarah's run hundreds of projects, just like where Anthony and I are now. And she might say, do I just go do this on my own? Like I have a reputation.
Yeah.
And Anthony and I are very open and transparent. We want to enable that, and we also want to prevent it. Like, is there a way to keep her inside, keep her extremely well paid, and let her own her own personal brand? Like, that's the holy grail of, I think, our business model. But if she wants to leave, like, great, and it's like success story. And Chris Walker saw this with Refine Labs. There's this like cohort of
Yeah.
people, like Kaylee Edmonds and a few other folks that have like, they are posting on LinkedIn. They have their own profiles. They left Refine and they either built a business or they've taken bigger roles off of the pedigree of what Chris had built at Refine. And that only helps Refine. It's like, wow, that's what a great place to work. And so it helps with talent. It helps with perception. And so I'll pause there because I just threw a lot out there, but that's conceptually how we're thinking about this evolution. And we're right in the thick of it right now.
Well, there's two things to that, because it's kind of like when I was like applying for engineering roles, like Amazon was like, if you worked at Amazon, their churn rate was like pretty
Yeah.
high. Not saying your churn rate is high, but their churn rate is like 2 years. But it's because when you get like an Amazon X engineer, they know that they work you, they know that you know their stuff, so it's kind
Yeah.
of like a badge of honor, quote unquote, to say,
Yeah.
if you worked at these companies. So it's a really interesting approach. And the other thing too was kind of, since you mentioned Sarah was like a pretty good fit because she understood your company, she understood the brand as well. One of the things I wanted to touch into was with inbound leads. So this kind of veers a little bit away from what we were talking about, but
That's what.
with the clients that you worked with that work with you, it usually took like that momentum to build up for them to convert as well. And were these people that were like already very familiar with the system, how the system worked, or were they kind of also clients that are like yeah, but like, can we switch this? Can we tweak these kinds of things? Or
Yeah.
were you like, this is our system, and like we remain firm to it?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I think it'll shed a lot of light for people who are in the services piece. So it's for us, those customers, they've been following us. Like we had
Mm.
established so much trust by sharing our frameworks openly on how to do this. Like you can go follow the Fletch process right now. It's free, it's out there. If you really want to dig in, we've got this little thing, it's like $50. You can go read everything we've ever posted, have all access to the frameworks. And we've had people, which is pretty cool. They're like, I did it and it worked. And like, we have all these cool things. Like, are we leaving money on the table? Maybe. But the customers that show up in that mindset, they're just wonderful customers. Like, there's no
Mm.
fighting. The trust is so high. They believe in the framework, they believe in the process. There's this delegation of influence where, like, when we ask them to make decisions and questions, they actually decide. Like, that's amazing. Now, as that was happening and we started to get a little bit more exposure, we would get these like second and third hand referrals. And so, for example, we speak at a lot of accelerator and VC portfolios, and we share our frameworks and insights. And some of those VCs even will like find us. They like what we're doing, and they're like, oh, you got to go talk to this founder. And but the way that shakes up is the VC goes, hey, founder, you got to go talk to these guys. They have a service that might be good. And these founders would show up knowing nothing about us, no clue who we are, or even really what we do. And they would be so skeptical. They're like, well, my VC says I should let you reposition my company. And in the beginning, we were kind of ignorant. So this was a mistake we made early on. We would try and cram 12 months worth of insight of how we view product marketing, how we view positioning, the mistakes people make, and the process people should do to go do this into a 15 or 20-minute conversation. You can imagine that doesn't land. It's just too much information to land. However, we're okay salespeople. Some of those we sold. It's like, okay, all right, yeah, I'm in. Like, enough. But then we get into the project. They were the worst projects of all time because they're just going to fight you every part of the way. And they have all these, and it's okay to have questions, but they had their own ideologies about how this stuff should go. Awful customers, absolutely awful. And so now we answer that very differently. We won't work with someone until they truly understand our methodology and process. And so if that same founder gets in the room with me today, oh, my VC says you should work with us. My answer isn't here's why. My answer is like, oh, well, I don't know. I don't think you should work with us. Like, if you don't think you have a positioning problem that we can solve, like, no, don't work with us. You're going to hate it. You're not going to like my recommendations. And one of two things happens. They thank us for the directness, like, yeah, you're probably right, which we just earned their trust without realizing it. And they start following us and then eventually come back later. Or they get in line and they're like, no, 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 I really want to learn. And like, oh, if you have a structured process, share it with me. And then they become good customers.
Yeah.
And so in this is almost like a little positioning insight is the ones who don't follow us, who don't actually think they have a positioning problem that can be solved with a structured process, not our ICP. Our ICP is founders that know they have a positioning problem, know they need help solving it outside expertise, and they're willing to follow a structured process to do it. If you don't fit that, like, we will not let you buy our product. And most companies and service agencies are the exact opposite. You have a pulse, you have money in your wallet, you can buy my product. And I'll tell you why. Like, and that's just, we don't want that. We don't want any part of it.
Yeah. You guys are like the bouncers now of positioning for B2B companies.
Yes.
It made me think too that even when you're selling, because obviously like you need to build up the reps in order to have this foundation as well. So it's not like, I guess, a freelancer coming out of like marketing school initially can just start off this way. But what was also interesting to me too is that your ICP, you also narrowed it down to being like you, and correct me if I'm wrong with this, but you sold to like the CEOs rather than targeting, I think, other decision makers. Do you always sell to CEOs, or do you ever target anybody else?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's evolved slightly
Mm-hmm.
as there's an argument to be made. We've layered on a couple sub-market segments to this. In the beginning, yes, CEOs, really founders. And the reason for that, and this actually ties into the model for even how we segment markets, the activity, we call it a use case. Sometimes we'll refer to it as a workflow, but the activity of positioning is something the founders own. If they don't own it, it's being delegated. There's risks. I'll talk about that in a second. But they're the ones with the positioning problem. And so absolutely, they're the ones that when they know they have the problem, they're the ones shopping for a solution, and they're the only ones that can actually solve it. And we see this in practice where the founder not only has to make the choice of how to position, this is where their true leadership and vision comes in, but then they have to hold the team accountable to it. The mistake people make is they delegate positioning, but it's such a strategic bedrock of everything else you do in the operations. When it gets delegated, you run a huge risk where the founder is now deviating and the CMO, and now you have this, like, there's almost two companies. Which thesis do we follow? And so for us, yeah, naturally it was founders. And also just in the beginning, the companies we were working with, we're talking bootstrappers and seed companies was probably I would call them our ICP in the early days. And there's some reasons why they were perfect. As we've evolved and gotten more exposure, larger companies also have positioning problems. They just show up a little differently. And so now we're working with a lot of growth stage companies who are like Series A and beyond, BC, even some publicly traded companies. They have a positioning problem, but it's not, hey, I'm starting this thing, I have some traction, I don't know where to focus. It's, hey, I started this thing, it worked, and now I'm figuring out what my next layer of growth is. I'm building another product, I'm going after another market segment. There's another positioning problem there. We just solved that next one. And it's those now we are getting some marketers that show up to us because as a company grows on the extreme end, right? Let's just take like Meta. Effectively, Meta is a collection of products. And so you got Mark Zuckerberg at the top. In the beginning, he owned the positioning of Facebook. What are we going to do with this one product we have? And he probably had ownership and a real big say as they started to launch, their ad side and their, all that pieces. But as they layer on more things and do metaverse and VR goggles and all this other stuff, you have to delegate ownership. You effectively have other founders in the business, other GMs that are owning. How do we explain this VR headset? Like, Mark's got other things to worry about now. And so that's where the CMO does represent now that founder in that smaller segment of the platform. And we work with them. I would say that for us is something we haven't totally tapped into. We get it a little naturally because, again, the use case, positioning, these marketers still say, I have a positioning problem, which is great. So our message works. As we evolve over time, we may actually even bifurcate our process of like, here's the process we run when you're a seed stage company founder or a Series A founder. Here's the process we run when you're a Series C company with 10 products. And we see this a little in practice. So far, the process allows us to flex to handle both of those, but it may evolve over time.
Well, there's so many other questions I want to ask, but maybe we'll do a part 2 later down the line. So, wondering what my last question would be. I always ask this to everybody at the very end, and I want to always keep it like very open ended. But okay. So, if you were to give advice to your 21, 25-year-old self, what piece of advice would that be?
I'll take the angle with the assumption that me as a 20-year-old or 21-year-old, I did want to build a business. So like I had entrepreneurship in mind. The biggest advice I would say is go do the work. Make the first decision to pick a sort of a space. And I would do that by saying, these are the type of companies I want to work with. These are the type of roles and work I want to do. And then I would go and immerse myself in there, but not just learning. And that's probably the mistake I made. I thought I had to go learn. I thought I had to learn before I could do. It's actually the opposite. And so I get a lot of people, probably around that age, come in and they're like, hey, I want to get into product marketing. I want to build a business. Where do I start? Follow your first inclination. And so let's say it's like, I want to build a business around product marketing or something. Great. Product marketing is a big surface area. Go read job boards of like product marketers. What tasks do they have people do? And it's a bunch of stuff: market research, segmentation, building account lists, doing positioning, doing messaging, writing homepages, writing copy, all these things. I would go pick one, or at the beginning, maybe do a little bit of all of them from an experimentation standpoint, and go do the work. And there's a lot of people frame this in a bunch of different ways, but you don't need anyone's permission to do that work. And even reflecting on how we built Fletch, we were just like, we want to do positioning. Well, no one would pay us to do positioning. Poor us. Well, guess what? We can still find these companies. Oh, you just raised a seed round. You just raised a Series A. We would just go do the positioning. Like, there's a bunch of information out there about these companies. We could see what they have on their current site. We could see what they've done PR-wise. And we would just go do the free work, share it, record a Loom, get it into a post, share it, send it to the companies, all the executives, and just say, hey, I like your company. I felt like you could be positioning better. And if it's not positioning, be like, hey, I like your company. I feel like your advertisements could be better. So I wrote you an ad. Share it. You're demonstrating expertise and, more importantly, initiative, because in the beginning, that's going to get you going. You will meet and connect with so many people, and you will have a business like within months. Because at some point of doing that over and over and over, you're going to get better, and then people are going to give you jobs, and you could just get those jobs through the side door. No application needed, because someone's working on those things already at these companies. I promise you.
Yeah. Would you also add the, because I know that a lot of people like they'll also like work very hard, but would you also add like the patience is also going to be very very key with this, because we want to see the results probably like the next month or like the next 2 months, and sometimes it's
Yeah,
not like
well, it's
that.
interesting. I wouldn't describe it as patience. I would describe it as consistency and conviction. And underneath this is like probably an interesting thread of like, do you really want to build a business? And because I think there's some people out there. Everyone likes the idea of it. I don't think enough people, especially like young folks starting their first business, like I don't think they really understand what it takes. Like how much pain is involved,
Yeah.
frustration, and time. And nobody sees that part, like the behind the scenes. I talked about Anthony and I spending thousands of hours, and we're talking nights and weekends for years, just grinding away. And that's just like the baseline. And you don't have to do that, by the way. So maybe patience
Mhm.
is right. You could take the longer road and do this within 40 hours. It's slower, and then the pain is worse because you're right, you're gonna not have the success. And so just like, do you really have that conviction to go on a 5 to 10 year journey committing to something? And maybe it's better to not know that and just dive in and then realize it later. But yeah, you
Yeah.
gotta be willing to keep going.
No, no, I get it. I think everybody always just sees like like the the Lambos and the trips and on first class, and they think that that's what being an entrepreneur is like. And
The overnight 5 year success. The
that one, exactly that one.
yeah.
But no, I mean, I really appreciate your time, Rob, and thank you so much for jumping on. You're definitely known on LinkedIn, but just in case there's that 1% of somebody who's watching who doesn't know, where can people find you?
I mean, LinkedIn is the place. So I think Hey Rob K is my little slash at the end of LinkedIn, but you can find
Yeah.
me if you just search my name or Fletch PMM. And then if you're really interested about positioning and are curious about potentially working with us, fletchpmm.com. And there's some resources there. You can see our work and some videos of our process and methodology. Those are the two best places.
Perfect. Well, again, thanks so much, Rob, for coming on, and I'm definitely looking forward to having a part two. There were so many questions that I didn't get into.
Well, you've done part one, Anthony, part two, me. Maybe part three is have us both on, and
That'd be good.
maybe I we've done a couple of these. They're usually a blast because we we both look back at the experiences and have slightly different things, and so even a route where there's like a game show of we both answer questions and don't know each other's answer, I think would be a blast. But again, your format, but that could be fun to have us
No,
both.
no, I was thinking of that too because I saw somebody else did that with you and Rob. I sorry, with you and Anthony. But I'm also thinking of like the wedding thing. You know when like wedding people, people getting married, they're facing back to back, and they put
Oh
the
yeah,
screw up.
who's more likely to, and who like all yeah
We should do that
that
for you and Anthony.
for sure. That'd be great.
But
Thanks for having
perfect.
me, Jordan. This was a blast.
Thanks so much, Rob. Looking forward to talking soon. Cheers.
Right on.